famous last words, right?
Right.
We'll go ahead and start the Willmar City Council work session for Monday, October 29th. First item on the agenda is the Willmar Bike Share discussion. Mr. Holland?
Mayor, we're going to start off with our PowerPoint, and we'll let Pam start off with that.
Okay. Pam Brewing?
Good evening. Y'all left me. Good evening, Mayor Kelvin, members of the council. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. My name is Beth Fisher, and I'm a Willmar Bikes Committee member. Here with me today are several other Willmar Bikes Committee members, Pam Fruink, Mel Odens, Leah Schuler, and Kristen Anderson. We appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what Willmar Bikes does, and we have an exciting new opportunity for you within the city of Willmar. Our hope is that you will find this opportunity favorable and that you will agree to move it forward to your agenda for the November 5th council meeting. So let's start with talking a little bit about Willmar Bikes. We're a bike advocacy group that focuses on improving biking in the city of Willmar. We want biking to be fun, we want it to be safe, an easy choice for all of our residents. We were established in 2014 as a group underneath the leadership of Community Ed and Recreation. Our group meets monthly, and we have a wide variety of different community members and organizations as a part of our committee. As you can see here on this slide, we have representatives from a number of different departments of the city of Willmar. We've got Willmar Public Schools involved, Kennewick County, both Public Health and Public Works, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Mid-Minnesota Regional Development Commission, and a number of different community members. We've done a lot of great things for our community over the years. One of our largest or greatest accomplishments is getting Willmar designated as a bronze bike-friendly community. This is a huge accomplishment for our community. There's actually only 23 different bike-friendly communities in the state, so this is a great designation for our city. Being a bike-friendly community says you care about biking. Biking is safe in our community, and it's very visible. It gives us credibility and allows us to access different dollars. It also helps to drive tourism and economic development for our community. So our committee works on really the 5 E's, the first being engineering. We work closely with Public Works and engineering. We help to determine and designate a number of different bike routes for our community. We purchase a stencil so we can paint the bicycle symbol on our roads. We put up over 50 different signs, road signs throughout our community on those road routes, and over 20 plus wayfinding signs have been installed as well. I think it's important for you to know that the funding for the signs and the stencils did not come from city dollars. It came from a partnership with SHIP or Public Health. The second E we work on is education. We have hosted a number of different educational events in the city of Willmar. We hosted a bike workability workshop, a bike open house. We've trained over 15 different educators on the Walk Bike Fun curriculum. We've been into the classrooms in 2nd grade in Willmar, taught them the rules of the road in partnership with law enforcement. And just this last summer, we put together a number of different educational videos to share on social media. The third E is encouragement. Willmar Public Schools was awarded a MnDOT bike fleet, so we have 45 different bikes that we can use in the community for group educational purposes. We put together or developed a bike sign. We have bike trail kiosks located in 4 different locations in our city, as well as 3 different fix-it stations. We've hosted a wide variety of different community rides. We went to different businesses, rides on the trails, to different events. We participated in 30 Days of Biking, Bark Your Park Day, and a number of different events. And we think that these community rides are a great way to bring our community members together and to improve our community, the quality of our life and health in our community. The fourth E is enforcement. Captain Anderson has been an active participant in our Willmar Bikes group from the very beginning. We are very supportive of the Police Explorers training. We've hosted a number of community bike rodeos. And the fifth E is evaluation and planning. And I think it's really important for you guys to know, we're using both the City of Willmar's plan and the Kennewick County plan as we move forward in thinking about what we need to do regarding biking. And I'm going to turn it over to Mel at this time to talk a little bit more about the county's plan and how it works with Willmar Bikes.
Thanks, Mayor, members of the council. I'm used to talking from this podium now. So she gave a really quick explanation of where we are in the plan, and she asked me earlier to reinforce how it ties into the larger county plan. And I think maybe one of the things that probably is a little bit brushed over is some people might wonder what the importance of biking is, but biking is important to tourism, and tourism is important to this economy, and I think it's number 2 of the economy in Kennewick County. So there is this economic tie to this. So what we did in 2016 and 17 is the county put together, we could feel this bike community coming. We could feel this wave of the need for handling the public demand for bikes. So what we wanted to do on our side is we wanted to tie into what the City of Willmar had done, but we also wanted to evaluate our system. We have about 650 miles of road, and we knew that we didn't want to just pick on kind of subjective requests. So like if somebody wants a bike from here to here, we had to have a system to put it together. So we did a plan. We came up with about 90 to 95 miles of our system, and which met the need of the requesting of the 390 some responses we got on our survey. So what we're kind of proud of on our end is 15% of the cost to do the system met 100% of the goal of the survey responses. So we had a pretty good savings on, just because we did a plan that ties to the city, it ties to our lakes, it ties to the cities, other cities beside Willmar, and it also puts some logic behind the larger plan. So that's why the biking alternative is important. I know it's a tough decision for the city as we evaluate the biking and the need for it in the business model, but I do think it's important. We think in the county it's important, and so I just encourage you to keep the momentum.
So 2 years ago, our group started looking at bike shares, more of a formal bike share program. The Yellow Bike program was introduced 3 years ago, and it certainly met a need for some to have bikes available to them. But we realized that the bikes were always in use and not necessarily being returned back to the racks for others to use. So that wasn't consistently available for people that would like to use a bike, especially for more recreational purposes. So we started looking at bike share possibilities. It's difficult for us to find a bike share company that's interested in working with a community our size. A group like Nice Ride, for example, is a multi-million-dollar company that's very prominent in metro areas, but not so much interested in coming to a smaller community like ours, which still enjoys biking and has some great routes for biking. So we found a company called Colony that's based out of Iowa that has bike shares now in Iowa and Minnesota. They're a relatively young company. This will be their 3rd season coming up, but they're very interested in working with smaller communities. So we've been communicating with them for about 1.5 years on a bike share. And on the slide here, we just have some of the different partners that have been working together on that. So Willmar Bikes Group certainly, and then with potential committed funds from the SHIP program through Public Health, the city, public schools, Convention Visitors Bureau, and also Caris Health. The bikes that we're looking at are really similar to the bikes that you would see if you've been on a bike ride with Nice Ride or Lime Bike or one of the popular companies that are in the metro area. They're 3 speeds. They work great for streets, not necessarily trail riding bikes, but certainly work well for paved trails such as the Glacial Lakes Trail with the trailhead just down the road. They are sturdy bikes. have a basket, so if somebody's going to the grocery store, needing to put in their towel and swimsuit to go to the pool or Robbins Island. Very weatherized also. They have adequate placement for sponsor decals, both on the front fender and the rear fender, and the frame. And then they also have dynamo lights on the front, which means that as soon as you start pedaling, it starts to gather energy to be able to put out the light. So they have good safety mechanism there that way. We're looking at 40 bikes, and they fit an adult. The seat post is adjustable, as well as the handlebar post being adjustable, but they are adult-size bikes. In speaking with Colony, and they did a very thorough evaluation of our community, both the size of the community, street-wise, route-wise, and some of the key destinations we anticipate that people would be riding the bikes. We are looking at 10 different locations potentially that we could place racks. We call them racks. The company calls them hubs. So if I refer to them as hubs, or you see that in your materials, that is why the word hubs is used rather than racks. This is a hybrid docking system, which means that you'll be using an app to check out the bike. You don't need a key to unlock a lock. It's all Bluetooth between a smartphone and then the bike itself to unlock the locks. They have a geo-fenced hub around the hub, so a person can only officially check the bike back in to that very specific location. So if somebody decides, oh, I'm done for a ride, and leaves it 3 blocks down the road from a docking station, they're going to keep getting charged for that bike, so it does need to be returned to a designated location. The 10 locations that we've identified here are not final by any means. These are just locations that we see that would potentially have high usership, especially around recreation. Caris, both the ACMC site as well as the Rice Hospital site, with their potential sponsorship with us, have requested to have a dock or a hub, at both of their locations, as they're really interested in having staff members be able to locate or transport between the two locations without needing to get in their car. Using a bike is very simple. Person downloads an app on their phone, sets up an account very easily, and then it connects with a bank account. It does need to be either a debit account or a credit card account. They just hit an unlock button on the app. It will send a Bluetooth message to the bike to unlock the lock, and then the person goes for the ride, and then they just go ahead and hit that lock button again through the app, and it will lock the lock on the bike. And then when you're all done with the bike, you do have to hit another button to say that you're done using the bike, and then that way it will assess the charge to the user at that point. The user fee that we've discussed with the company that they recommend, especially for a community when they're starting out, is about $1 per hour for the bike, to make sure that it's very accessible economically for the user and really encourages a lot of use. I believe I'll hand it off to Kristen and Leah to discuss the fees.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Anderson with Kandiyohi County Public Health.
And I'm Leah Schuler with Kandiyohi County Public Health.
So Public Health has been a strong supporter of this project, and also the bicycle-friendly community designation and the work that goes into promoting infrastructure and practices around making communities safer and making active transportation a more viable choice for residents and visitors. So essentially what we've got left here in the presentation to share with you, now we're going to look at the bike share cost. So as Pam said, this has been in the works for over a year now. We've done our due diligence, looked into a lot of different options. So we want to break this down briefly for you. What you see at the top, there are essentially two parts to this. So the initial investment and then ongoing costs. So the first part of this is the upfront infrastructure purchase. And you see the total, the one-time charges for the first year at $44,100. You'll see the good news later, which is we have committed funds for that amount. But we'll just go through that briefly. So this includes 40 bikes, and we have chosen refurbished bikes with 2-year warranty. They're fully refurbished. They were used for less than 60 days at another location, but what that did for us was cut the cost in half. So $750 a bike. These are high-quality bikes. You saw the photo. They're durable, they're high quality with a pretty long lifeline. And then we've got 10 hubs, as we said, that would be placed throughout the community. So 9 of them would have a spot for 6 bikes. And the last one, we imagined, would be out at Robbins Island, so slightly more capacity to hold more bikes. And then the hubs will all have solar charging stations, and those have a dual purpose. One, if you need to charge your smartphone because you need to return your bike and for some reason you're out of battery, these hubs are there for you to charge your phone. They also function to charge the locks. So the locks need to be recharged on a regular basis, although it was every 2 months. So this is not high maintenance, but there is that. So it will not be connected to any city electricity. These would be self-sufficient hubs. Below that, you see the Colony Connect software. So the other piece of this is that Colony, the bike share company, provides training for staff and then provides this software. So all the bikes have tracking system on them. So the purpose of this software, essentially, first and foremost, is that you know where all your bikes are. At any given time, you can see where they are in the community. From a maintenance perspective, that also allows you, if you've got all your bikes out at Robbins Island, you might need to redistribute those to different racks throughout the community to make sure that they're accessible. Also, you can see the routes where people are taking your bicycles. So you know where people are using the bikes. If you want to reposition hubs, if you want to get more bikes, things like this, you can see all the routes where people are utilizing the bikes. You can also get demographic information on people using the bikes. And Colony did say that this was an asset that a lot of their clients didn't realize they would use so often, but sort of the analytics that come from this software were really helpful, particularly looking at the routes used and ways to make infrastructure improvements and prioritize these kinds of things. And that essentially went into point 2, which is ongoing bike share cost. So there is an annual fee to utilize the software from Colony, and they calculate that per bike. So that's the estimated cost for the software. And then we put in a budgeted maintenance cost. So these bikes should not have a lot of ongoing maintenance costs. They're heavy duty, quite durable, but there will be, we should anticipate minor fixes, you know, a chain here and there, a flat tire, a tube to be replaced here and there. $70 a bike is a high estimate, but we built it in that way just to be realistic. Yeah.
So like we said earlier, the good news is we have all the allocated dollars raised. So the committed funds, the verbally committed funds have come from $20,000 from Caris Health, $10,000 from the City of Willmar, $5,000 from Public Health through the SHIP grant, and $10,000 through Willmar Public Schools. Caris believes that this is a positive partnership with the city and the community. That's why you would see them giving so much. It would promote health and positive connection around the community because health happens outside of the clinic. Some other things that you see on the side, something that we didn't add is that November 5th is our deadline. So in order to get this $750 cost for these bikes, we're working with Colony to have them purchased by November 5th. So that's where we would hand it over to you and say that that's when the deadline needs to happen. But we have some potential sources moving forward. We've applied for the Burnix Family Foundation grant, and out of 99 applicants, we were invited back for the top 24 for their second round. We just submitted a video on Friday to the IDEA Fund for Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're working in collaboration with Bethesda. We have a letter of support here from them to say that we want to work together, and it makes the most sense. I think you would see in our history all the organizations that have worked together pretty hard and consistently, that we are always about collaboration. And then also looking at Vision 2040. And the reason why we would look at additional funds is that we want this to be sustainable. So a 3-year pilot is how we're imagining this to see if it's a fit and it works for the city of Willmar. And these funds would help with the software, the maintenance fee, and then also kind of brainstorming some outreach around making sure that they're for everyone in the community and how we can get everyone on the bikes. There's some other additional sources, sponsorship ideas around businesses being involved. There's lots of creative things around that, but that would be something that would be decided later once the bikes were here. So like we said, our role was to get it here. We worked really hard. We've been working for 2 years on this project to get it here, and we feel like we have the best product in front of you that fits our community. And it's ready to be handed off in this pilot program. So the city would take on the responsibilities of sustaining the project. So it'd be this one-time purchase of the funds that are already raised to Colony. You have a draft sponsorship agreement with Caris Health, so they have some language around what that would mean for them to give the $20,000. You would have an annual software contract, so this would hopefully be covered in these grants that we would be raising. Like I said, with Burnix and Idea Fund, the $2,400. It would be covered under your liability insurance because it would be city property. You would have staff oversighting this project because that's the sustainability of it. And then the bike maintenance and repair, like we talked about, with the $70 being on the high end. And then bike storage in the off season. So why biking? Why does this matter? Biking is for community vitality. It brings people outside, it connects people, it gets you from the place you need to go and the places you want to be, and it's an investment for an amenity that just makes sense. And we believe this is a natural progression from all of the work that we've been doing for 4+ years around biking, and this is just the next step that makes sense for the community of Willmar. It's recreation, like I said, it's community health. It's a mode of transportation for a lot of people, and it's a reliable mode of transportation. They can look on the app and they can see that the bike is there and it's affordable. And then it's a huge asset for tourism. Lots of communities have this and tourists use it often, and it will create economic development.
So just in closing, we think that the bike share is a great opportunity for our community. We hope that you feel the same way. In order to move forward, our goal is a spring 2019 launch, and we hope that you'll enter into an agreement with Colony. We hope that you'll move it forward and support it to be able to go to the council meeting on November 5th. And then we'd entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you guys for your presentation. And Kirsten, thank you for the phone call last week. I appreciate that. And Beth, your phone call as well. We have a little bit of a snafu in that we meet on November 5th. And so the action wouldn't be taken because we traditionally don't take action at these meetings. And I don't know, Mr. Holland, were you?
No, they understood that.
Okay.
And maybe before you ask some questions, I do have a few comments if you guys want to have a seat. So last week, I was provided with some references to some other communities that do this program, and I called 3 of them. And I spoke with a city administrator, and I spoke with a person that actually ran a program in Humboldt, Iowa, and then Forest City and Pocahontas, Iowa. Did I just say Iowa? Anyway, I got a lot of good information, and I do want to pass on a couple of things. We'll start off with the positive that all 3 communities had positive comments to say about the program and about Colony, the contractor. So that was a good thing. The other thing that I picked up on was who are the users in these towns, and Humboldt and Forest City are college towns. They both have small 4-year colleges, and the college students use the bikes and go downtown and then back to campus, or they go out to the park and then back to campus. And then also they use it for their trail system, and it is a big part of their tourism to get people into town. They have a lot of their main users use it to ride on their trail system or to just go around the outer loop of the city. A couple of things that, as I reviewed this program, Colony, as they stated, has only been around for a couple of years. So they're a startup company, started by a couple gentlemen. I read their bio, it was very short, but they import these bikes overseas. And one of the things that they're requesting in their contract is that 2/3 of the money be put up front before you get the bikes. As you know, that's generally not a good thing to do, is to put the money up front, especially if you're dealing with a new company. So that was kind of a red flag for me. Generally, I've only done that maybe twice in the last 10 years, pay for something ahead of time, because we're a city government, we're good for our bills, we pay our bills. So generally they waive that requirement. And I haven't talked to them, and that's a possibility we can work something out on that. The next thing is the number of bikes. I know that Colony is recommending 40 bikes, and they're going to give us a discount because some of these bikes are used. But when I looked at the other towns, they generally didn't have more than 10. And they put them at strategic locations. And so that's another thing that I think that if we were to get 40 bikes, that maybe we only put 20 of them out and we put 20 in storage as backup. Just a consideration. The other thing that when I talked to the other communities, these bikes, and these were all in Iowa, but they only run the program for 6 months out of the year. They don't try to run it in the winter. They put the bikes away. So that's something else that we need to keep in mind. As they said, the insurance really would not increase upon the city having these bikes because their dollar value. Although I would tell you that, you know, you swipe your card, you go out, you ride the bike. What if you throw it in the creek and then you leave, you know? And this is a, you know, $1,000 bike or $750. Who's going to pay for that? You know, if it's one of my kids, they got $100 in their account. You know, they're not good for it. So those are some things that I need a little more time to research on how we would pay that. I know with our liability policy, we're going to pay 100% of that cost, right? That doesn't mean our deductible. Karis has offered to sponsor, you know, the program, and they had a one-page contract. I think that's something that needs to be reviewed, and I would work with them on that because it's, they're asking for a lot in that. And it's a good thing that they want to have the bikes between ACMC location and the downtown location and to put some of the hubs there. And that's a good thing for their employees to go back and forth and to use the bikes. But their contract basically says that, you know, they have complete control over new additional bikes and who can put their sponsorship stickers on, and their stickers stay on there forever. Well, that's a long time. Forever's a long time. So that's something that I think that needs to be addressed with them. I think we could work something out on that. Last, I will say that some of the other towns charge $2 to $4 for their bikes. I noticed that, you know, but doubling it from $1 to $2, it doesn't, you're not making money on this anyway. But you do want to put a price on it. So that's kind of, you know, some of the background that I got from it. I learned a lot about the program. Again, all the communities were in favor of it, and I will say that all of them had only done it this year, and I think one community had done it for 2 summers. So this is a new bike share program here in this area, but they both did say it was favorable by the city and the residents. So with that, I'll stop.
Pam, could you or someone on your committee kind of address that concern about them being new? Had you vetted other companies as well?
So we found two other companies that were willing to discuss a potential bike share here in Willmar. One company called Zagster, and you may have, they've been in the news recently because the city of Superior, Wisconsin just brought them into their community. And they had I believe, a partnership with the hospital there, if I'm not mistaken. But it's around $80,000 to $90,000 to do a similar bike share project with that company because you don't actually retain ownership of the bikes. You're essentially working as a location for them, and they take care of all the maintenance. They have the bikes, so every year there's a recurring charge of $80,000 to $90,000 for a similar size bike share. And we did connect with them at the beginning, but that's just not sustainable. We didn't see for our community to be able to pay that annually. Colony was the next bike share that was willing to return our phone call and willing to discuss with us. I would say we connected with at least 5 or 6 other companies that were not even willing to return a phone call or an email because of the size of our community, because they work in large metropolitan areas. There was one other company similar, but a little bit more expensive, and the quality of the bikes was just a little bit lower, we found. So this was the only company that we connected with that has been willing to discuss for the last year and work with us on the potential to coming to Willmar.
Thank you. Council, what are your wishes and what are your questions? Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sometimes things look too good to be true. It sounds really, really good. But I'd rather be cautious on this for several reasons. One is we're just getting this now and supposed to make our minds up by November 5th. I mean, why haven't we heard about this 6 months ago and brought to us? Second, how does this affect our local bike shop? Has anybody talked to him, Rick? I mean, it could have a detrimental effect on him. And third is, we had a yellow bike program. It's maybe still out there, but it didn't work. We saw a lot of bikes trashed, busted, broken up, one in a ditch and a slough. I'm rather cautious. And then the company being 2 years old and wanting upfront money is, I have the same feeling that the administrator does. We as a city shouldn't have to do that because we do pay our bills. But I'd proceed rather cautiously on this. Maybe next year, because November 5th is right around the corner, and I'm not ready to make a decision on it. I'm not.
Councilmember Maskey.
Thank you for your presentation. It's nice to have a well-thought-out proposal brought together that comes with sponsorship tied to it. I appreciate that very much. A couple questions. First, the dollar per hour, is that intended to come back into the city's coffers to be used to perhaps offset the software and maintenance piece?
80% of the user fees come back to the city. 20% goes for operating cost back to Colony.
Okay. And then, as I was thinking, I'm just thinking beyond. For tourism dollars, has the county been approached to having a station in Spicer and New London along the trailing system so we can actually use it for tourism across multiple cities, and if partnerships could be arranged through that kind of an idea?
I do know that there's been talk, but that it has not gone to the county commission for any request at this time.
So we do know that the city of Spicer is interested as well too, and we would believe that the city of New London may as well too. CVB has a bike committee group that works with the communities of Willmar, so the Willmar Bikes Group, the city of Spicer and city of New London, and we think that there is a collaboration that we can do. We have just started because it came from the Willmar Bikes, the Willmar Advocacy Group within the city of Willmar.
I totally understand that. As far as Willmar's concerned, I think it's a very well thought out plan. I'm just thinking of potential down the road. It seems very logical if we're going to be pursuing something in the avenue of recreational and tourism types of things that we would integrate all the communities along the system. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Councilmember Alvarado.
I was going to ask, so what's your timeline after the 5th? What happens? Let's say this moves forward and we agree with it. How do the dominoes fall after that?
Being that these are refurbished bikes and they received a limited number from the bike share that they took over out of Colorado. So that's why these are coming with limited use at the reduced cost. And as one of the other women mentioned, that the full price bikes are $1,500. So with the limited number of bikes that they have and a lot of cities vying for these bikes, that's why the November 5th deadline is coming up very quickly for the bike share. If we would go into, the city of Willmar would go into an agreement with Colony, then we would be looking at a spring 2019 launch, where in the month of May, we would do a launch to bring the bike share here. So all the bikes would be refurbished by that time, decals applied, everything ready to go, and they would, all the hubs would be installed in Willmar, and then Colony would, part of their agreement is to help us do a kickoff launch party in the month of May. So the anticipated season would be May through October of the year, with them available for use the months of May through October.
Okay, so that would be about 6 months for them to get the program, get the bikes here, get them set up and
provide training also for the staff members that would be working on the administrative side of the software here to track analytics and look at any redistribution of the bikes.
Sure, thank you.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. Pam, I'll just ask you to explain with the Yellow Bike program, just kind of the history of it. The plan with the group was to sunset that program. Could you just address so people understand how that got started and where it's at and what the plans are both with that and then the other part that was being done with the Earn a Bike program?
Sure.
If you would do that.
Thank you. So the Yellow Bike program is sunsetting this year as the last year. Worked great in some manners for the community, bringing bikes to people that didn't have transportation. In other ways, as Councilmember Christensen mentioned, there were some drawbacks also with some people that didn't care for the bikes in a way that we would have liked to have seen. But one thing that it did bring to our attention is that there really is a transportation gap with people needing bike transportation, not just vehicle transportation. So with the Yellow Bike coming to a close now, it's difficult for it to be sustainable without a significant volunteer base. And we have volunteers that are working with bikes, but not as strong enough to continue where we refurbish the number of bikes that are available. The bikes themselves for Yellow Bike came from the impound lot with the city, as well as community donations with the bikes. And many of them required significant repair. They wasn't just a grease the chain and here we go, they're ready. They required significant hours to refurbish them. So it was difficult for that to be sustainable in that manner. This formal bike share is very different in that there's accountability financially attached to the bike. So not only that $1 per hour, but we also have all the information for the connection. So if a bike would be returned in disrepair or somebody would purposefully vandalize the bike, we would have the user information to be able to move forward with any type of enforcement that would be necessary.
Can I ask one more question? Okay. I'll ask just one more question. You mentioned that it's coming to us tonight and you're asking us to make a decision in a short period of time, but I just want to speak to the time frame a little bit. Mr. Bresendine had put this has been a work in progress, I know, for a long time, and Mr. Bresendine had put the dollars in the budget a year ago, and the goal was to raise the funds. If we couldn't raise the funds to do this, then it wouldn't happen, and I think we're here now because the funds were raised. And it's important that this program be sustainable, and I think that the group has done a good job putting together a model that will be sustainable for our community. And so, yes, it's a short time frame, but I do think it's been well thought out. I think there has been a lot of homework and a lot of different things to looked at with this. And so I'm hopeful that we can be supportive of moving it forward. Bikes are a great asset to our community, and this group has worked hard not only on the bike-friendly designation, but in biking both in our community and working. The tourism dollars are large for our community, and I think we need to recognize that too. And I think this is a great step forward for a lot of different factors there as it transitions to the next stage. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not convinced that this would bring tourists to the county, this bike program. And just a reminder to everybody, government can't be everything to everybody. Just can't be. And we're presented with requests constantly about we should be doing this, we should be doing that. It sounds really, really good, but I don't think it's something that we should be involved in. If you can get funding from outside the city, I would say go ahead with the program. But we just can't be everything to everybody, folks. It's just we're constantly being requested funds for whatever it is, Vision 2040, this program, that program, and tax abatement, and TIF districts, and we're just spreading our dollars way, way too thin, and we're not taking care of our buildings. That's my comments, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate the fact, well, first of all, thank you for the presentation and all the work and effort that you all have put into this. I appreciate that we've got really a 3.5 to 1 ratio in return on our investment from the funds that have been raised from that point of view. And so I understand from Councilmember Nelson's point of view that these dollars have been budgeted there in the 2018 budget. Is that correct? Did I call you Anderson?
No.
Member Nelson?
Oh, you were looking at the mayor, and I wasn't sure if you were asking. I believe the mayor had agreed to put it in 2019 budget. The funds from the school were budgeted through Community Ed and Rec in the 2018 budget. Am I correct in that? And the dollars that are being committed from SHIP are you might want to address your time frame with that too.
2018, the big roll.
Okay. Then another question I have is, from the work that you have done, do you have any idea what kind of revenue to expect once the program is up and running from looking at a community our size, regardless of number of bikes?
So it would be hard to make an estimate around that if we have 40 bikes. So part of the reason that we thought about having $1 an hour as opposed to higher costs, it's true, a lot of communities have higher costs. We wanted to start out, particularly in year one, making this as accessible as possible. So if someone, even on their lunch break, wants to run an errand or, clinic to the hospital, if you can do it for $1, it's different than if you can do it for $4. We ran some numbers, and this is not going to be a revenue generator. I mean, if every bike was 40 bikes taken out once a day over the course of about 6 months. Who's good at math? Who did that?
Not a lot.
Not much.
So, it's not enough to even cover it is not enough to cover the software costs. 80% of that coming to the city. However, there are other options. For example, on the weekend, you could raise the rates. So if you work under the assumption that on the weekends, you may have more tourists who are coming to utilize the bicycles. So you may be able to use an increased rate. You can look at different pricing structures. But in terms of year one, the way that we've positioned this, and then it would be up to the city, to make this decision, how you would want to price this. We did not price this as a revenue generating initiative, at least for year one. So I'm not trying to evade the question, but if you think about it, it's not a lot of money coming in. It could be potentially if you were to raise it. Yeah.
So from what I'm hearing is you don't expect that it would cover the costs for us to operate it for the year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But I think if I could just add, we do know that there's going to be a map. So you have the app that'll be there, and people have to use the app to check out. We can sell business sponsorships for as low as $100 and get people to, people will want their businesses on the map, and that will be another way to bring revenue in. We talked about other communities. Could we partner with other communities to have them partner in? We want to be able to use the same share system or that same app so we can be able to use throughout the whole thing. We don't want to pay 2 different app fees. So that's another way that we can potentially bring some revenue in. So there's a whole number of different ways we feel we can bring revenue in. We don't think with ridership it will pay for it.
Okay.
But you could do the math on that. If you had 20 local businesses that wanted a marker on the app and you asked $200 to get this marker on, then you've got $4,000.
So just help me understand, they do or do not need to return the bike to the same location that they rented it from?
Okay, it's a great question because it seems confusing. So they do have to return them to one of the hubs, but it does not have to be the same hub.
That helps.
And
Thank you.
also, if you've got a 6-slot hub, and let's say there's already a bike in each of those slots, you can still lean your bike against the hub and lock it. You just have to be within the geofencing of the hub, which is a certain radius.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment I would have to one of the items that our administrator referred to, and the idea of putting some of the bikes in storage. If we move forward with this, I would prefer that we order the number of bikes that we plan to use. It doesn't make sense to me that we would put things in storage and not use them. So just a comment I would make in regard to that. And my last thought is in regard to the yellow bike program. And I know that this does not meet the same customer needs at all. But one of the reasons I believe that the yellow bike program, some considered it a failure, is because we have people that live in our city that need a bike to get to work. And they were keeping those bikes in their own garage and using them for their own personal purposes. But you know what? We were giving somebody a way to get to work. And really, what did it cost us? Not much. And so I would like to see us seriously think about some kind of a program where we could use the bikes that are usable in our impound lot and find a way to get those into the hands of citizens that truly have a need and let them have those bikes and have a way to get to work. So just, I would hope that we would consider that as an addition to this program.
Councilman Nelson.
Thank you. I don't know if you're willing to share, we've struggled with that, what to do with those bikes. And there are some things that the bikes group has been working on with how to continue that. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, whether that'll happen or not, but that was not something that was going to be done within the city. It was being done by bike advocates through churches and some of the other things to continue to repair the bikes and to continue to try to get them out in the hands, because there are, you just gathered up the bikes. There are a lot of bikes. There are bikes that are on our auction every year. And so that is a different concept with that. This is just taking this biking a different direction. And Beth, you didn't introduce yourself when you stood up, so I'm going to put a plug in for you from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We've talked about tourism, though, and I know, Mal, I've heard you talk about tourism, too, and I think we would do a disjustice to ourselves if we did not recognize how important tourism is to our community and to our county. And I know you have statistics, and I would, if you're willing to share them, either one of you, I would appreciate that in the concept of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yep, certainly tourism is the number 2, Mel mentioned it earlier, the number 2 industry in Genuine County. It's a $95 million industry, so it's a significant industry in our county. We have tourists coming for conventions, to take their vacation here, different sporting events. It brings about $6.2 million in sales tax revenue, and I truly believe this is a great asset. This would be a great asset for our community, for our county. Biking is a popular tourism activity. When we had the yellow bikes here, we had people who would come for a convention, who would stay an extra day to go out on a yellow bike. This is just a great opportunity for us. I really hope that we will be able to have the opportunity to share it with both our residents and our tourists who come.
Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Who would operate this? Is it Community Ed and Rec, or Park and Rec, or our Public Works Department? Who's going to be in charge of this?
Mr. Holland, do you have that assigned to somebody yet?
No, I didn't assign it, but it would make logical sense to put it in my recreation department. And talking to the other communities, they used college interns over the summer to run the program. Then most of them just had a one-man operation or one-person operation, and then they The software applications, those go right back to Colony. But the maintenance side of it and the tracking of the bikes, usually it's one person.
So we'd have to hire an intern during the summer to do that.
Could that be under the work share program at the college? Would that be eligible under anything there?
Say again, Mayor?
What is it called? What's it called? Work study. Under work study?
I'm not an expert on work study, but I've never, it could possibly work out that way. Or we can have someone, a combination of the maintenance side goes to someone in Public Works, and the recreation side kind of does the daily check on the bikes kind of thing. So it's kind of a, it's not an 8-hour job or anything like that. It seemed like to me we could divvy up some of that work.
And I think under our org chart that we received a couple meetings ago, biking falls under Brianna at the, I didn't see her name right. Britta, man. Britta at the community center, I'm sorry. Correct, that's where it falls? Bikes fall under her, right? Yeah. Okay. First off, let me just thank you all for the work that you've put into this. I have been an advocate of biking since 2002 under Vision 2020 when we first talked, and Mel is well aware of this, when we brought the first bike trails to Willmar. And you already had a good part in there, but working with Andrew Beer developed that even further and more comprehensive. You and I had a conversation, I think a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where we just talked about how biking has expanded in Candiway County. And I think your numbers you gave were pretty astonishing. 100% of the surveys were covered by the funding that you had put in place. So thank you for your vision of making Candiway County a bikeable community. I get a fair amount of visitors from out of state that come and stay with us for whatever reason. And we rent bikes regularly. I mean, when my wife and I go out to an area where we haven't been before, it's one of the things we look at. Do they have a bike share program? Do they have a place where we can jump on a bike, tour the town, whatever the case is? And, there's places that charge $5 and $6 and $7 and $8 an hour to ride a bike. And you have to return it back to the station where you picked it up at. And so I've had a lot of experience with this. We have the mayor's bike ride. We talk about the collaboration between the three cities. We've had the mayor's bike ride for 5 years. This year, Willmar is hosting, and the preliminary plans are in place for putting that together. That would be a good event to kick this off at. Just a little segue for whoever's the mayor. That would be a good event to have, and some stuff to do in the downtown area. So when we take a look at our Robbins Island events that happen out there, we're always looking at how can we get people onto that island without impacting a whole lot of cars. And this is a way that we could do that. The 8-spot bike area was at Robbins Island, I noticed that. So your team has worked endlessly to bring this to fruition. And would have we rather had it here a month and a half ago or 2 months ago? Yeah, we would have rather had it here then, but that didn't work. And so when you got the data together and you had the information to share with us, you brought it to us. And I appreciate that. So thank you for the committee that works tirelessly. And I believe that Rick is on that committee, correct?
He's been active. He doesn't come to all the communities, but he has been active in a number of different things that we've done.
Correct, but I mean, he's on the bike committee.
No, not as a committee member, no.
Oh, he just attends? Because I know he's been at some of the meetings that I've been at, so. And we can probably check with him on some of the maintenance stuff. I know one of the things, the tubes and stuff was talking with him about that. For what it's worth, I'm glad you guys are here tonight, and you've got some good information. I think we have some questions that we asked, and I think the city administrator will get us answers for that. So any additional questions after my lengthy conversation? Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for being here. Next, we have Celebrate the Light of the World light display. Mr. Holland.
No. Mayor and council, tonight I just brought this back. I know James is here tonight, and I appreciate you coming, James. And he's already presented, at our last meeting and talked about, what we're going to do out there and everything. But I worked with our city attorney, and we drafted the agreement, the license agreement, which I included in your packets. And I just did that to see if you had any questions. And I asked James, he said, do you want me to present anything tonight? And I said, no, I wanted them to see the agreement, and then if they had any questions, that we can answer that, but then we can get this approved on the 5th. So there's no presentation, but after you've read through it, do you have any further questions from our previous presentation?
And I just want to recognize John, who is the coordinator for the Celebrate the Light of the World, is here as well. So, John, congratulations on your big award down in Rochester. You guys did awesome, represented Willmar well. And so, what I understand, 2 firsts, is that correct?
4th place on the chorus.
Okay.
Through, I get lengthy as well too, not too lengthy. The Eastern Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, and 2 Canadian provinces. We're the best small barbershop chorus, and the 4th place chorus in that group as well too, and our quartet to 5th, moving up from 9th place to 5th place. So it was a good fun weekend. So. Good,
representing Willmar well. So thank you very much. So appreciate that. Anybody have any questions? You'll also notice on this is that there's a recommendation for funding for $17,000 to help them kick off this project. They're doing private funding as well, but this would help with some of the infrastructure needs that are needed out there for getting the Celebrate the Light of the World out at Robbins Island. So, Councilmember Meske.
The 17,000, and that's more infrastructure. Once that's there, those won't be ongoing payments, correct? And then, feel free. And I was going to ask, I just drove out there today about security ultimately out there as well.
You come on this, Councilmember Meske. No, the intent would not be to continue to ask, though we'll continue to accept if that is the case. But no, the infrastructure, our hope is to be able to put in some semi-permanent power lines in order to get it around the full circle. That's what quite a bit of that is. So we'll also go to structure pieces to hold up. And if you drove out there, you saw a few of the things up there, even though we didn't sign the license agreement. So technically, they're not up there, Mr. Scott.
Yeah. I did not drive over any of those things or under them.
Most of that, the monies we're looking on that is for the power infrastructure side of things, and just to bump this initial for a first year to go moving from a 3 acre spot to a 17-acre spot. We do have sponsors. Sponsorships are coming in as well too that we're reaching out on. Yeah, and this wouldn't be something that we'd be looking to assist or the city to assist us with each and every year. It's just that initial, okay, we need to get this moving. We want to get rolling. We want to keep that momentum going that Chad's built up over the last 10 years.
That makes sense. And in that investment, can you address a little bit about security out there? Because that is a very large area. And I was concerned a little bit just looking around at potential vandalism or anything else that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, our obvious hope is that it doesn't happen, but we are looking at that proactively. So some of the things we've talked about, I know one of the outreaches we've been working with is some of the construction firms that have the pole light systems, so we're able to put up some cameras. We're not going to obviously be able to have a manned guard out there constantly watching everything because of the size of it, but we do want to be able to take a look at that, keep an eye on some of those things. I think some of the signage that we're talking about utilizing on site would also hopefully deter individuals. And frankly, talking to Chad in the 10 years that he's done it, I think there was one incident that he really remembers, and that was something that happened a couple of years ago, but really hasn't been a bit of an issue. We've talked with law enforcement a little bit about potential upgrades or additional drives out there, so we'll have to look at what those would incur.
Excellent.
We've been playing phone tag, me and Mike
Chief Felt
as well. So, yeah.
The original request was for $35,000, and so this was an agreed upon amount that was lowered from the initial request. So And there were reasons for that. That came from Chad.
Oh, okay.
And I think that was in June, I think it was. So when we were first talking about it. So this was an amount that the city administrator felt comfortable with. And so a number that the city administrator did not recommend, but that I asked if we could bring forward. So I think that's a fair way to say it, right, Mr. Holland?
That's fine.
So, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think this is going to bring people to Willmar. There's no doubt in my mind. You said sponsorships. Are they going to be recognized out there somehow?
Absolutely.
I know I talked to Chad, and he said there's been several that have come forward with money, and will there be plaques, or, I mean, something as you drive in saying who's sponsoring it, or how are you going to handle that?
Yeah, we've actually put together a pretty good package for different sponsors for different levels. There'll be some group signing at a lower tier level, as well as announcements on the music, the soundtrack that will play. As you go up in sponsorship value, there are larger signs, but individual signs. So we will sponsor, I'm trying to remember what the number is off the top of my head, $5,000. They will have a couple of signs out there by themselves as a sponsor.
Will they be lighted then to be?
Yep. The sign itself won't, but they'll be light around the sign so that the sign is visible throughout the night. I think we're also looking at some spotlights for some of the potential signs for the bigger sponsors. But no, we will definitely acknowledge them through that. We'll also acknowledge them through our social media platforms, through some of the advertising pieces that we'll run both on radio and in print, so that they're recognized not only on site but also off site, so that people who maybe don't get a chance to get out there necessarily will be able to understand that they've been community minded and involved in this process.
Well, thanks for all you guys are doing. That's when is it going to be starting again? Just shortly?
Fingers crossed it will start Thanksgiving night.
Okay.
Hell or high water, it'll start.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nelson, followed by Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you. I'm excited. I was a regular out at the other one, bound to do that. But I did take a drive through there today, and it was fun to see what's already there and the potential for that. But I do share Councilmember Meskey's concern about security, and I know we'd had those conversations this summer about doing that. I don't know if we ever got an estimate for cameras, but hopefully we can work with you to make sure that it is secure and see what we need to do this year and future years. Just as Robbins Island continues to get used more, I think we have a responsibility to make sure it's safe for everyone. So I thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Keep sorting light bulbs, right?
Yes.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you repeat for us? I know you talked about this the last presentation you did, but what are the volunteer opportunities for people?
Well, right now they are wide open. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, they'll be putting up. Again, we're not actually putting anything up on the land until this agreement is signed. But we are going to put up the tunnel. The theoretical tunnel will be going up tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. But we do have a sign up that's on our Facebook page, on the Celebrate the Light of the World Facebook page for individuals who want to come out and help set up the lights. John and a bunch of volunteers over the last, 2 weeks now have tested the lights and actually started to stage the lights so we know where they're going to go, what particular item they're set up for. So there's opportunities for that. I know a lot of the heavier items have been put up, or some of the taller items have been put up.
Yes.
Well, there is still a gigantic flag to put up, but those opportunities right now, we're kind of planning for Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. As we get closer and the time crunch comes, I'm sure we will add some more weeknights. But again, trying to do that after hours so that no one has to take off work necessarily to do that.
And working the weekends too, so we don't run into the light issue as well. The daylight issue, I should say.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Yeah, I showed up. I didn't sign up. I showed up. A friend of mine told me about it, and we went sorting lights. So I would say if you want to go, if you want to be a part of it, you'll find a spot for them. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So is there a staging area that if somebody shows up and says, hey, you know what, I got 2 or 3 guys that want to get together and just do this. Is there an area where they could meet up with you, or they just go to Robbins Island, or what's that plan?
Mostly it's been out at Robbins Island. We've got most, I would say, the stuff that we're working on prepped and ready over at the Leaf building. But anywhere's on Robbins Island, and then if you cruise around the lot, you'll be able to see where we're working.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott, can you just go over in high detail, so don't get down in the weeds, basically what the lease is doing and the purpose of the lease, and what the lease does to protect the citizen and the city and the citizens?
Sure, Mayor, members of the council. The agreement in the packet is actually a license agreement, which is different than a lease agreement. This is essentially how cities grant permission for others to do something on property they own. So you're not conferring any property rights. You're not entering into a term where someone has a enforceable right to the land itself. You're just giving permission to an entity to use the land for a specific purpose. That's what this agreement does. The agreement itself is, I would say, fairly routine. We use these a lot. Anytime the city's granting permission to someone to use, for example, the right-of-way or land in a park like this is what the license agreement does. It requires insurance and indemnification just to keep the city protected from any claims that might arise from this use of the city's land. Otherwise, it establishes the timing for the display and when it will be constructed and when it is intended to be disassembled each year, and just the general rules that will govern this permission that's being granted to Willmar Fest to construct the display.
Any other questions? Again, I would like to thank you for the work you're doing. I agree with Councilmember Christensen that this will bring people to Willmar. If you take a look at what the Kuzmans did, and special thanks again to Chad and Angie for the commitment to our community and the tremendous donation that they made to our community to keep that here. So thank you very much for all you guys are doing. I know you guys are putting a lot of work into this, and we're looking forward to a great show. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You can stick around for the rest of our meetings. It's all going to be about finance, so it's all numbers. So. Did anybody sign up for public comment? Next, we have the finance agenda. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you very much, Mayor Kelvin. I will call on Mr. Oakens, but before we start, we've kind of been going through some existing policies, and wanted to bring you some things also to just review the audit findings that were there. Just they aren't significant, but these address the 3 findings that were there, along with some policy review that we will hope to take action on at our next council meeting. So go ahead. Thank you.
Councilman Nelson, members of the council, as Councilman Nelson said, we met, and there were some policies that needed some housekeeping type items that we went through, as well as we got the audit findings. The first item is the credit card use policy that we had. The primary reason that you're seeing this tonight is that in 2016, the treasurer duties were reassigned, and the city clerk treasurer's job description was revamped, and those duties were assigned to the finance office. And so the primary changes you see within that policy are just replacing the city clerk treasurer terminology with finance or finance office. We also are recommending that instead of listing all the department directors, that we just do a generic department directors, and that again is controlled again by the city administrator. So our office does track that. We will be requiring them to sign the credit card user agreement, which basically says that they are, if there's something that the council has determined to be not eligible or according to state statute, that they will pay for that and be responsible. So again, this is for your review tonight, and it will require a introduction of a resolution on the November 5th council meeting. So we're happy to make any changes to that if or comments.
Okay. Any questions on the credit card policy with the updating? Yes, Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, with this credit card policy, is there a limit of how much they can spend, or?
Yes, Councilman Alvarado, the limits are in line with the purchasing policy that the council has adopted. $5,000 limits on per card and $25,000 cumulatively total of all the cards together.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the credit card policy? All right. Thank you. We will move on to audit findings.
The audit findings, members of the council, there were 3 audit findings, and the first one was to revise the year-end policy to reconcile construction in progress. If you recall, there was some construction in progress that had not been recorded. What had happened there is we had changed the procedure to where departments did not have to hand in a fixed asset sheet when there were projects in progress. We've since changed that back to where, as we progress through a project, along with having the construction manager's position, that will document those and have those handed in as they expend money for a project. And then at the end, if it's not completed by the end of the year, it'll be reported as a construction in progress. If it is completed by the end of the year, then it's capitalized as part of that process. So we have talked with Public Works and the construction records manager and plan on scheduling a meeting in the month of December to go over all projects and have an update to the council as well as far as a report of any uncompleted projects. And that should address that construction in progress recording.
Any question on that item? Not, go ahead.
The second finding was a review of the records retention policy on quotes and bids. What had happened there were there were some quotes or bids, that unsuccessful quotes and bids that had not been in the file when the auditors reviewed it. That is a requirement. And so we have revisited the records retention policy with department directors and have changed the procedure to where we will attach those in a project file of all unsuccessful bids as well as the bid tabulations.
Any questions on that one? Go ahead, Councilmember
Thank you.
Christensen.
So we're required to keep all unsuccessful bids too?
That's correct.
What was the reasoning for that?
There is, I believe, a records retention state law that requires that.
So you have to retain them, what, 5 years, 3 years, 7 years, or what?
I'm not sure what the records length of time is on contracts, but I'm guessing it would be 7 to 10 years. I'd have to review that.
Okay, okay, thank you.
But as long as whatever the records retention state law requires you to retain those, they would have to be held in the file.
Okay.
I know when we met, we talked about this, but whose responsibility is to keep what records?
The data practices or records retention policy, the city clerk's position is the authorizing authority that the council has designated, and they do that annually. Within that, then there is redesignation to the department directors to maintain their department or their areas.
Any other questions on number 2? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you again. I'm curious, how did they find that we didn't have unsuccessful bids on file?
Part of random checking of accounts and or bids is to randomly check certain bids, certain files. I mean, there's a process, even on accounts payable, there's a random list that they run through and they verify documentation and those types of things as part of the procedures.
So we were only keeping successful bid files?
In the files that they found, only the successful quote or bid was attached.
Okay, I see.
Mr. Elkins, the purpose would be to make sure that the other bids were...
So that there was if there was a contention or something later on and an unsuccessful bidder would question the procedure, that you could go back and see the documentation.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Any other questions on number 2? Otherwise, we'll move on to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to, this is all electronic, isn't it? Saved electronically?
Yeah, the records retention policy has been changed to where that is a requirement now that all records are to be put electronically, and we are working towards that with all the departments, but it's a
ongoing process?
Yes, when the council adopted the records retention and data practices policies, from that point on, all records are supposed to be eventually put in electronically.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
So at this point in time, you're saying they're paper, right?
There are some that are still paper, and as staff time allows and permits, that is something that's being worked on. Yeah.
Any other questions on 2? Otherwise, we'll move on to the third one.
The third finding was to adopt a policy for electronic funds transfer. And again, this was a new state statute that was done out of the 2017 legislative session. Attached, you'll see that we have attached the statute, and basically in formulating the policy have taken subdivision 3 and subdivision 3A and incorporated that as the policy. And this will be the only one that there will be action that you will need to take at your November 5th meeting, and that is to actually formally adopt the electronic fund transfer policy by statute.
Any questions on that? All right. We will move on to the annual investment policy review.
There is one one change that is being recommended to you tonight on the investment policy. This is an annual review that has, again, with redesignation of duties and stuff from the city clerk treasurer to the finance office, has been something that has been not done annually, which is a section in there that requires it. But on electronic page 44, near the bottom of the page, you'll see that the FDIC insurance has actually increased from $100,000 to $250,000, and that's the only recommended change at this point. We are working with local institutions who are helping us review the entire policy. We are looking at additional changes to section 8.5, which is also on the electronic version, page 44, defining more of what state obligations or investments would be allowed. And we are also looking at section 11, diversification, as far as on page 45. That was changed a number of years ago to where no more than 40% of the portfolio can be with any one institution. Also attached for your review are monthly reports that we had historically and still do, but have kind of summarized them, or summarized our investment report monthly to you in our monthly report, where we just give you the investments by institution so that it meets that 40% requirement. But we've also included the third quarter activity, as well as a list of our portfolio, the interest and dividends to date, which is slightly higher than it was in 2017 at the same time. That is due to some increasing of rates as they are slightly climbing. Also some couple of historical reports. So at this point, again, the only change in the investment policy that's being recommended is that the FDIC be updated from $100,000 to $250,000. And this, again, will require some formal action at your November 5th council meeting.
Any questions on the annual investment policy? Go ahead, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you. Just a comment, going over the historical interest / dividends received per quarter from 08 to 18, we used to make a lot of money annually. And I didn't realize it had gone on. That's drastic, from almost $2 million to $613K. Wow.
One of the items that we'll talk about in the next report is basically the funding for our street program and the utility fee that you talked about at your last council meeting. And the interest earnings from the community investment fund used to help fund or totally fund, and that's why there was a need to find some alternative funding sources of the utility fee and or possibly a local option sales tax.
Right, right. If we could only get back to high interest, huh?
Indications are that they are expecting, the feds are expecting increases in the Fed fund rates up and through the third quarter of 19.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the fund balance policy.
There's a few recommendations here for the fund balance policy. Some of this will help in the discussion as we get into the December and the budgeting process. One of the recommended actions was to reduce the stabilization fund. The page numbers that are on your committee action form are actually a page number off from the document that was included. We had a working document that had a cover page, and that was the explanation of why those page numbers were quite off. But the first recommended change to the fund balance policy actually is on page 2, or electronic version, page 54. That would reduce the amount that is in the stabilization fund of the general fund, also known in past as emergency fund appropriations, from $2.6 million to $2 million. 600,000 reduction is being proposed to be appropriated in the 2019 budget. The second change is on page 3, or electronic page 55, where it addresses the monitoring or reporting and the use of the funds as they are designated, and it has corrected the report that was in there where we were using committed funds first. They should be last in their usage, and the unassigned, as been past practice, is used first. Example would be on the unassigned would be a carryover balance, and we'll talk about that when I get to the list of the fund balances, and the budget practice to where we would take the unassigned amount and inform the mayor of that during his budget process and appropriate it in that cycle. One of the items that action you took at your last meeting where you approved the applying for a grant for playground equipment, the $100,000 that was planned for in 19 allows you to move that to 18 and use that unassigned amount and then take advantage of grants and those types of things. So that's the action that we'll be doing on that. But so those have just been reversed in priority order. He's got it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Meske.
Oh, just a question. Give me what's the rationale for moving the 2.6 to 2 million in that stabilization fund?
That was a request from the mayor. It's in the budget for next year. I don't know if Mr. Oakins wants to elaborate on that.
The history on the stabilization fund has in the 20 to 25 year range, and has never been needed or used in each year. That there's 2 years of allocation there. And so that history, along with the level of funding, was basically some of the discussion as far as the need for having it at that level, I believe. The third correction that you see to your policy is on page 4, or electronic page 56, and that's the removal of Rice Memorial Hospital as an enterprise fund equity, and that's due to the lease to Caris Health. That's just a housekeeping. We do not have Rice Memorial Hospital as an enterprise fund at this point. Their activity that the city is accounting for is in the debt service and general fixed asset group. And the fourth and final correction is just basically correcting terminologies on page 5, or electronic version 57. As far as appropriations, it should have been anticipated revenues and or revenues. So it's just a cleaning up of that terminology. Included in your packet also, along with this, those changes, is a listing out of the 2017 financial report, listing the fund balances and their designation as far as non-spendable, restricted, and committed. You'll see there that the working capital of $4 million, which was in the wording document, is the self-insurance of $1 million, and the next year budget and current year emergency really is the stabilization terminology, and will be changed in next year's financial statement to coincide with that policy of $1.3 million each. The other fund balances that you see listed there, again, we had talked about the unassigned amount and how it is used in the budgeting process. We had $1.4 million that we appropriated in 18. There's approximately $850,000 there for 19. Will be reduced by that $100,000 to take advantage of that playground grant, so that we can handle it in 18 rather than 19. The retired sick leave held, that's where employees by contract can leave their sick leave with the city and apply that towards their health insurance. the current employee's insurance buyout is the liability as far as employees who qualify for your current employee early buyout program, if insurance, that is the liability as of the end of the year for the current employees. The sick leave is the accumulated sick leave that by contract employees would be compensated for if they were to leave employment, as is the vacation. And the retirees insurance buyout is that portion that employees that have retired, that the city's $430 a month. That's that liability that the city has for those few employees that are retired but still receiving that benefit. The other classifications you see there, special revenue funds, the industrial development account. We'll be having some future discussion on that as far as the sales that are being discussed and being worked on as far as the Y project and or possible sale of some lots in the industrial park and the designation of how the council wants to maybe utilize those funds. The CVB, special revenue funds as defined in the fund balance policy, are funds that the city council has designated to stay for the purpose for that fund, even if they don't spend it in the current year, unlike the general fund where it goes back. Debt service funds are restricted by your bond covenants. Those are normally built up from prepaid assessments, and the capital project funds that you see there are for ongoing street projects and those types of accounts. So when some of the discussion comes up about fund balances and excess fund balances, they are pretty much all assigned or committed, except for the dollar amounts that are available there at the end of the year that by practice has been used in the budget process. Again, this will be action that the council will need to take at your November 5th to make those changes if you decide to do so.
Any questions? Okay. I think that's what we have for tonight. I know we're working on a few more policies, and also I think we have some budget overages or project overages that we need to come back with before the end of the year, or before we, probably in November sometime. And also there are some, I think, pending budget adjustments for 2019 that'll need to be reviewed again also. So any other questions you have regarding finance? If not.
Okay, thank you. That's all we had on the agenda. Just wanted to update the council on an item that came to the city administrator and my attention on Friday of last week. And we have an opportunity to consider a deed grant. And so that will be coming to us on the 5th. And that grant will be for downtown improvements and for new windows at the Lakeview High Rise. And so I was hoping we would have that information ready for tonight, but obviously it wasn't. But we just found out about it on Friday. And so that'll be something that'll be on a quick turnaround. So we'll have to listen to it in the work session and then carry it forward to the meeting, because it does have to be acted on because the grant is due on the 15th of November. And so we will not have a meeting prior to that. So with that being said, if there's nothing else to come before the council, we will stand adjourned. We are adjourned.